Still another drug song I flat out refused, so they dropped me from the label. Frank Sinatra Jr. He just said no. Back in the Toronto of the 70s, the original Second City Club, in spite of its wealth of comedic talent, failed. Not to be deterred, the group opened again in a new and better location, the old Fire Hall on Adelaide Street. Upstairs was a cabaret room where Marty Short performed in a revue called What's a Nice Country Like You Doing in a State Like This? Downstairs, the Second City troupe included a wildly talented guy from Hull, Quebec, Dan Aykroyd, who shared my love for deep dish rhythm and blues. Dan had a distinct genius for spoofing those lovingly ridiculous characters we had all seen on Canadian and American TV as kids. The Second City location did brisk business, and the producers offered me the job of musical director. I loved the comedy, but hated the pay, which was half of what I was making at Godspell. I turned it down, but made the scene incessantly. Meanwhile, Brian Doyle Murray had moved to New York. By then, he and Gilda were Splitsville, and Brian was carrying a torch. The only thing that's keeping me from killing myself, he said, is Belushi. If I swallow the bottle of sleeping pills, I'll never get to see his Joe Cocker again. Enough already, I told Brian. I'm coming down to see him for myself. I flew in. On my very first night in the city, Brian took me to the off-Broadway Lemmings show. Act 1 consisted of Second City-style sketches. Act 2 was a full-on parody of Woodstock. Chris Guest did a spot-on James Taylor. Chevy Chase was hysterical as a stoned-out drummer. But Brian was right. It was Belushi's Joe Cocker that brought the house down. He was the whirling, swirling, groveling, growling English soul singer, showering the audience with beer, falling on his face, delivering a career-making caricature that's going to be remembered as long as our memories hold out. That same night, Brian took me over to Belushi's place, where I met John and his wife, Judy. Doug Kenny was also there. Doug had begun the National Lampoon magazine and the National Lampoon Radio Hour. He'd used his years at Harvard to develop a devastating wit and earned himself a place of high honor among the generation that was about to reshape comedy. Later, Brian got me a little work on the Radio Hour, and I got to know Doug. You couldn't help but like the guy, even though you saw he had a dark side. When he died in the mountains of Hawaii in 1980, his demise was shrouded in mystery. Had he jumped to his death, or merely slipped and fallen? His friends, who loved him dearly, said that he was looking for a place to jump and slipped. They felt that the twist honored Doug, whose brilliant sense of humor was rooted in the morbid. I agreed when they said that Doug would have appreciated a joke about his own demise. Meanwhile, back in the happier days of the 70s, Belushi and Doug were thick as thieves. And when Brian told John I was a piano player, John said, "I got a gig as Cocker in Jersey tomorrow. You can do Leon Russell. We'll do the whole Mad Dogs and Englishmen routine." I wouldn't know what to do, I said. "Bullshit," said John. "You put on one of those crazy top hats, stick your finger in the air, and you're Leon Russell." I thought about it. I had Russell's piano style down, but I was intimidated by Belushi's bravado. Without even hearing me, John had more confidence in me than I had in myself. "Sorry," I said. "I got to get back to Toronto."